So welcome to our town hall, and thanks everyone for joining us today in June. We're I'm just going to give 2-minute update on things. I usually do this at the beginnings of our town hall, and then as we have here, George is going to talk to us about composites within OMERACT and using composites in our OMERACT process. And then we have the Flares and OA group joining today, and hopefully our PSA group has also offered to join in because they've been working with and have some experience. Oh, Katie's here now. Just in the nick of time. Welcome, Katie. So I was just saying that George is going to present an overview of composites using the OMERACT process, and then 2 of our groups have volunteered, and Katie just joined. So our Flares and OA, Francis is here, and also Katie has just joined us from the PSA. And just to share like your own experiences about using composites within your working group and developing. So that's awesome. And people will have questions, I'm sure, as we go post the presentation and during. And then at the end of it, if we have time, there's just a general sort of question and answer period. Look at this, 333 days now until this meeting. Thanks to Shauna for always having the clock on there. So it's the countdown time, and we're excited that it's now moved to Barcelona. Well, not excited, but it's moved to Barcelona. And this Terrassa area, I've heard from people, is amazing. This Jordy and others have been saying this is unbelievable. They've been meetings there. So we're looking forward to that. It'll be great. And keep watching that the clock counting down to that meeting.
Yeah. If it's Shauna approved, it's great with me.
Oh yeah, Sean is always amazing at everything. Just a couple of quick updates. We're going to be having a new handbook, which Shauna as well has been leading us through all of the changes and edits and stuff. And so there's going to be a new handbook, and so stay tuned. You'll get an announcement about that in the very near future. Just lots of stuff on the OMERACT, on the OMERAD. Just make sure that you share those modules, the e-modules, because lots of people really enjoy the patient one. And if you're having, want information about our methods piece, the OMERACT domains and instrument stuff, those e-learning modules are really, really good. So make sure that you share those with your working groups and keep up to date on that, because we're going to be adding a couple to those as well in the next little while.
Just to say, Bev, I just posted up a new one on the Spirit of OMERACT.
Oh, thank you.
So that's up there now, and a little bit later this month, there's going to be one about OMERACT conferences. Now, everyone on this call is pretty familiar with how our conferences work, but especially for new people or fellows that are coming on and PRPs, there's going to be a module about what to expect at an OMERACT conference.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, thanks, Jonna. That's perfect. Yeah, people really love those e-learning modules. They're fun, and so thanks for that update. Great. Because I talk about those when I'm on all the working group calls as well. So another thing that Shauna has done for us is added these wonderful town halls, because we've been sort of moving in towards it having a methods piece at the beginning of each of these town halls, like we will today on composites. So the town hall, you can go to the town hall website now and get the recordings from those. So if you missed a town hall and you want to see, something on binning and winnowing, you can go in and just look at the town hall that we held that day. Today's June 18th, so this composite one will also be up there. So it keeps people, especially because of the time zones, they don't always get to join. So it keeps people up to date, and lots of people have been emailing me for those recordings and stuff. So make sure that you keep up to date on that. And our next town hall is going to be in September. So I'll show you that at the end of this. Any questions about that? And I'll just show you that the next town hall, we do not have town halls during the summer. So our next town hall will be in September. So stay tuned for the announcement for that of what the content of that will be. And if people have suggestions of things that they want to send, about methods pieces within the domain and instrument work, please let me know, and we can work on that during the fall. So any questions? If not, I will happily turn it over to George.
Okay. So I got a lot of files open. So usually when this happens, it takes a while for it to come up. So bear with me.
Oh, that's usually me, George.
Yeah. I believe it's this one. If it isn't, ignore it and I'll find another one.
Shauna is not the only one.
It's thinking.
Yeah. Perfect.
Is it there? Great. All
You
right.
just, blow it
So,
up.
so speaking of the summer, I happen to be,
Katie,
oh, sorry.
Katie, you had a question or?
Oh,
I
what
think
happened to my screen?
I think I'll let George finish that first before I ask that
Oh,
question.
no, Katie, go on. I was just going to give an off the cuff comment. So you just do whatever.
Oh, I just wanted to ask questions like PSA group is really facing an issue about how do we define what is composite, because it's like, yes, we have a core domain set, but composite is really like an outcome for a particular kind of trial. So if the trial change, and then the content will change. We'll try to put it in a way that is it RCT, is it longitudinal observational trial, and then we ask people around. And then composite for PSA, there is lots of argument, and then it has been discussed 1,000 of times, and we have tables to summarize in which meeting it has been discussed, which has not been discussed, and people are still circling around all the same points, whether this should be included, that should not be included, whatever. So then the conversation will never end and never got to a conclusion. So then a definition is not that easy to draw. So
Yep.
do you have any advice on that?
That might be a nice discussion item afterwards.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that'd be good. No, I agree. I understand, Katie. So maybe with the just going through these set of preliminary slides and then listening to Francis and the OA Flare group and yourself, that would probably be a nice kickoff for that. All right. Yeah, no, the off the cuff remark I was going to make, Katie, was simply that I'm in Western Canada right now, a couple of provinces over, which means it's about Europe 1.5 times, the width. And I'm right now enjoying very nice weather, but back home in Ottawa and Toronto and that, it's going to go up to, I think it's going to be 35 Celsius later this week or something. So I'm happy to be here out west.
Yeah.
Okay, so
water, no water out there.
yeah, that's right, exactly. So I'll give an overview to the composites, and did I have this in? I think I do. The composites. A little bit of background. We've been talking about composites at OMRAC for a while now, within the tag, within the OMRAC Technical Advisory Group. And the reason we're doing it is that we know that when people go through the go through the process of looking at core outcome sets, they may identify an outcome domain that may be best represented by multiple outcomes. And examples of this could be disease activity indices, flares, responder indices, and so forth. And so when this came up, we formed the composite working group, and you can see some of the characters on the right-hand side there. And this was the group that actually presented at the last OMRAC, looking at composites when we met in Colorado Springs. Now, so this very brief presentation of an overview, I'm drawing from two papers. The first paper was one that we published in Seminars in Arthritis and Rheumatism, looking at things that we called multiple outcome domains, or MODs, and composite outcome domains, or CODs. These are terms that we came up with. I'll give you a bit of the genesis of those terms as we go through this presentation. The other component I'll be drawing from is the composite workshop that we did in Colorado Springs last summer. where we call it Weighting Matters, Advancing Composite Outcomes at OMRAC. And as far as I know, and I could be wrong, and Shauna can tell me I am wrong if I am, that I think this has now been accepted for publication. So the goals are very simple for us here today, is just to appreciate the steps in, choosing the outcome domains, identifying the appropriate instruments, weighting the outcome domains, and then putting the composite instrument through the OMRAC filter. Now, when you look at those steps, all of them should be relatively new to us, except for weighting the outcome domains. And that's why the focus at the Colorado Springs was looking at weighting, because this is kind of the new aspect that we have to deal with. Yes, we have a bunch of instruments looking at the different domains. How do we actually put them together? The second thing we want to do is to gain an understanding of the different types of composites, and that gets us into this term mods and cods. And we had a lot of discussion about that among our group of what we should consider to be a composite within OMRAC. And then finally, to look at some of the benefits and challenges of the composite outcomes. And I think Katie's already brought one up, but we'll go from there. So let's go ahead with composites of mods and cods. So the diagram on your right-hand side, this is, as usual in the OMRAC way, the group has put together, a little pathway for us to follow. And there's 6 steps there. You see 6 little dots, and they're the steps that we would follow in choosing the composites. The very first step is just to define your concept, okay? And, by that we mean that we want to bring a bunch of things together, a bunch of domains or instruments together to capture some concept. And the question is what concept do you want to capture? And there's different ones. There could be disease activity, could be flare, could be a response or a remission criteria, or a host of other aspects. So that's the very first thing to consider, is when you bring these things together, why are you bringing them together? But we know that it may require multiple things to be brought together to appropriately capture, let's say, that remission target. The next step in the process is to identify the domains. Okay, so again, with these multiple things or domains that we want to bring together are going to be determined through an OMRAC way. And over the years, we've developed the idea of putting things in an onion, where we have the key stuff in the middle. The outer layers may be less and less important, and then we even have things outside the onion. And so when you're building a composite, you could have, core items, okay, within that onion, or you can have things even outside the onion. It's very flexible. And just to remind you of choosing the relevant domains, I'm not going to dwell on this, but we do have an OMRAC way for choosing the domains. There's the 6 steps. Basically, you generate the domains, you agree, you have delphis to come up with the key ones, and then you put them in the onion, which looks something like this, where we have the mandatory domains broken into specific, those that are mandatory in all trials. Oops, sorry. Those who are made for specific situations. And then we get the less and less important ones, or maybe things that are just under a research agenda. Third step now is to identify the instruments that are going to measure that domain. And a good quality instrument for measuring each domain will be selected, again, following an OMRAC process. The nature of these outcomes the measurement nature could be discrete, could be continuous, could be a combination. And again, there's a process for selecting the instruments, and an instrument selection algorithm that I'm sure all of you have seen before. The next step, and the big step, and the new step is weighting the domains. Okay, and how do we bring these instruments that we've identified for each of the domains together? So for the composite outcome to adequately capture the target concept and capture it well, requires that multiple domains be brought together. To bring them together means that we somehow have to weight them and combine them. And there are many different ways of determining these weights. And we'll see it with OA flare and psoriatic arthritis in a few moments. They can tell us how different ways that they looked at it. And in particular, Francis presented these at the last OMRAC meeting. Okay, so why wait? Why wait? And weight being not W-A-I-T, but weight being this weight. Patients may experience several different outcomes of interest. The response to therapy likely will not just affect one of these. An outcome that can somehow encapsulate these things may be of interest. And it's interesting when you look at the literature, you look at the regulatory literature, you get a number of different words that describe this concept. The FDA will talk about composite endpoints. The FDA also talks about multi-component endpoints. And the EMA talks about composite discrete activity scores. Okay, all very similar concepts, all with different names. And so we had a lot of discussions over what we should call these things. And that's when we came up with our own terminology, right or wrong, which was MODS and CODS. Okay, and a COD, okay, is a composite outcome domain. Probably more precisely, it should be a composite outcome domain instrument. And it's a term used when the interest, okay, that we have is the occurrence in a patient of any one, okay, any one domain or some domains or all the domains. So if you take a look at risk of adverse events as an example, maybe any one of these risk of adverse events triggers the composite to say it has occurred. Or if we're looking at something like remission criteria, we may have maybe a set of criteria, and you have to say yes or no that each criteria met the threshold. And if all of them met the threshold, then we say the person has met the remission criteria. So that's what a COD is. It works on things that have yes or no in it, and any one, some, or all will indicate that the composite occurred. We often deal in our area with MODS, or multi-outcome domain, or again, more precisely, multi-outcome domain instrument. And this is when an individual, when a patient is actually evaluated on several different components, okay? And then what we do is we bring all those components together to come up with a single score according to some type of rule. Okay, and an example of this is combining all components when considering disease activity. Okay, so for example, the ACR20 is a MOD. The DAS28 is a MOD. You measure different things on individuals, and then you bring them together, okay, and through some weighting process, and come up with a single score. And the CDI is another example of a MOD. So we have MODs, we have CODs. So the MOD could be an index, a sum of measurements of each of the component domains. This is an example of this would be the CDI. CDI has 4 components. We simply add them up, okay, and that's the overall score. Another index we can have is a formula combining the measurements of each of the component domains in a weighted fashion. An example of this would be the DAS28. We got several components, and each of them gets a weight, and then the weights put them together. On the COD side, one or more outcome domains occur versus no outcome domains occur. Okay, again, think of things like the adverse event profile or the remission profile, or all domain outcomes occur versus otherwise. Sorry, that would be the example of the remission. So I can't do them all in a short presentation, so let me look at this one. There is a very nice paper, if you're interested in disease activity in RA, and I know we're looking at FLAIR, and I know we're looking at PSA, but I'm sure that everyone appreciates rheumatoid arthritis, that provided a catalog of a number of different COD, what I will call MOD instruments. There's also a study that looked at, did a systematic review of randomized controlled trials, and said, well, what did they measure for rheumatoid arthritis? And they found that the one that's most often used is the ACR20, followed by the DAS28, ESR, and CRP versions, and then the ACR50. So what I'm going to do is the DAS28, as I mentioned just a little earlier, is a score as an example of a weighted MOD instrument. So let's take a closer look at that. So it's a multi-outcome domain instrument, the DAS28. It had the outcome domains that they identified were joint tenderness, swollen joints, inflammation, and general health. And I realize there's no fatigue in there, so I apologize for that. But this was an instrument that was developed a while ago. Outcome domain instruments that were selected. The tender joint count 28 was used to measure joint tenderness. The 28 was also measured the swollen joint count. The ESR and general health status was also measured 0 to 100. And then when they found these 4 domains, these 4 instruments measured the domains, they then said, well, how do we combine them? And this is the formula they combined them from. And the first thing you should do is to say, where in the world did this thing come from? Okay, this very interesting combination of the items. I'll just display it. I'll give you the answer in a second. I'll just display this in a way that I like to view the composites. In the first one, the first column, I like to see the outcome domains. These are the 4 they identified, and the next column identify the instrument that they considered to look at that domain. Okay, and then we have the outcome domain weights. Okay. And here's the weights on each of the outcomes. And then we combine these things into the bottom half here, which is the actual DAS 28. Okay, which again has that weird formula. Here's where it came from. And I remember talking to them when they were, this is actually going back to the first OMERAC, and the ACR 20 was coming along. And of course, this formulation is quite different. And they were developing the DAS and later versions, the later version of the DAS, and they were basically all statistical. Okay, so it's a statistical steps, just to make sure we did it twice now. Statistical steps. They used a principal component analysis that resulted in 5 factors. They then came in with canonical discriminant analysis. Okay, then they did a further analysis. Identified and did discriminant analysis and multiple regression analysis, and so on. So basically, the way that they developed the weights was totally a statistical process. Okay, everything from principal components, discriminant analysis to regression. Okay, and very intricate process, and that's why you see this particular equation. There are other ways of doing it, and we're going to hear from the FLAIR group and the PSA group, maybe the way that they did it. The approaches that other approaches that are around are discrete choice experiments, and the vasculitis group is following a process like that, or you can do Delphi panels. Okay, with a clinical investigator. There's also disability adjusted life years. So there's other different methods. I showed you the very statistical one, but there's one that may be more of a discussion way of doing it with discrete choice experiments and Delphi panels. This is just a general layout. I'll make these slides available, Bev or Shauna.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. Now, this is just a general way that I like to look at it. Again, you got your domains, you got your instrument that measures the domains, you've got your unweighted version, and you got your weights, and then you got your weighted version and the score at the bottom. Okay. So this here, some people will just, measure them and add them. The CDI falls there. The DAS, for example, falls there. And then the CODs, again, you have your domains, you have a measure of the domains, and then you have an indicator for each one of these measures, and either one, all, or some of these things may end up in the equation of saying it's occurred. So if it's, say, an adverse event, if any one of these things occurs, the CODs have occurred. In the case of remission, each of these may be a threshold, and if each of the thresholds is met, all of them occur, then the COD has occurred. Okay, so there's the MODs and CODs. And then, of course, the last step here, and we can't get away with this one, is that once you develop your composite, you still have to look at its validity. You still have to pass it through the OMERAC filter, through truth discrimination, to get at truth discrimination and feasibility. And that's the last step in the process. Okay, what are the benefits? What are the challenges of this? I'm not going to go through all of these, and some of these are obvious and other ones are not. And I have 3 more minutes, so I got to watch my time. So first of all, you can avoid a misleading conclusion when, let's say you're looking at an intervention, reduces a less serious outcome by increasing a more serious outcome. So you're bringing all the things together. Another one is you can avoid unnecessary complexity when outcomes of identical significance to patients but different pathophysiology would be analyzed separately. So you can bring again, the different perspectives together. And I noted that fatigue, for example, wasn't within the DAS. Decrease necessary sample size and duration. So statisticians, we love that. Avoid the need for statistical adjustments because you're doing one test on one composite, not on the individuals, items within the composite. You can look at the estimate, the net clinical benefit of an intervention. So it could be, the good and bad being combined. So you get the net effect. Improve the understanding of the effect of the interventions, avoiding competing risks. So sometimes if one outcome occurs, another outcome cannot occur, and you have a competing risk situation. That's more of a statistical issue. Avoid the needs to choose a single outcome as primary when many are of equal importance. Okay, so there's some of the benefits. Challenges. Interpretation could be problematic when component outcome domains vary appreciably in patient and provider importance. So in other words, to the patient, these are the important ones, these are not important, vice versa for the provider. The larger the number of components, just think of this, you got to identify your domains, identify the instruments, weight them all together and put that through the system. The more components you have, the more work you have. Excessive influence of more imprecise subjective component outcome domains. That could be a problem, or a more subjective one is driving it. An adjustment of alpha error, or if you want to look at the components within the composite, then you now back to the situation of doing multiple testing or multiple outcome considerations. I'll leave the 3 COD ones now because for you, just for the interest of time. Reporting. Okay, so good reporting means that the composite is reported. That's the one that your conclusion will be based upon, say, in your clinical trial. But the components can be reported separately and should be reported separately because we want to know, is there one component that's driving the composite, or are all the components going in the same direction, and things along that line. So we want to avoid the suggestion that individual components have demonstrated to be effective. So in other words, we want to base it on the overall. Okay, we don't want to base it on the individual components, but we like to see how those individual components are driving the outcome. Some people will put an a priori rank from the worst to the best for each component domain. Okay, and then some suggest that when we look at the components, not only do we look at the individual components, but we look at different combinations of them. So these are, we drew these 4 items from the world of composites. Outcomes where, if one occurs, the composite occurs, but they're equally applicable to all the different versions of the mods or CODs that we can think of. So summary points, or in the very end here, Bev will be happy. So, okay, so our steps in our development, you identify your core outcomes, you identify your instruments, you determine the construct of the instrument, combining them, and that is the difficult step. And we'll see what our groups have done. Putting the instrument through the OMERACT filter, and then you got your statistical and reporting approach. Again, the conclusion should be based on the composite of your trial, but the individual components should be evaluated, but they do not determine it. Heterogeneity of treatment effects across the component outcome needs to be considered, and strategies for reporting and statistical measures are available. So if you get one component if all the 4 components, say, in the DAS are supposed to be going in the same direction, 3 go in one direction, 1 goes the other way, you have to ask yourself why. There are guides for interpreting and applying the results of these things. I've given you a brief one on the previous slide, but there's many others in the literature. And care must be exercised to help ensure that the proper development methodology is followed in terms of the steps at the very top of the slide here, and they're done in a transparent manner. Okay, so what's the tag going to do? I really would like to keep a catalog. So all the processes that OA, flare, and psoriatic arthritis are doing to try to combine these different components within their composite. I'd really like to put that up on a website that we can share with other individuals. So we have about 4 or 5 now. So I think we should continue to do that. We'll try to come up with guidance and training on how to meet some of the challenging issues and mitigate them if possible. And some of the ones like that I'm sure Katie's going to bring up again to go through that. And I'm sure that Shauna will set us up the website that we can to do that for. And that's it. So a couple of minutes over, Bev, but I
Oh,
apologize.
that's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I'm sure Shauna's thinking about the e-learning, the e-module that we're.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
That's
So I'll stop sharing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do people want to ask questions of George first, and then we can move into our groups if you have particular questions? Yep, Loretta.
Just one quick thank you very much. It was very enlightening. There are two minor things. One is I have never seen a composite coming from the beginning with the domains. Usually you know which domains you have to measure, and then there are some instruments, and then you just go there directly. So we have to go through all the first steps.
Well, we were, and certainly Bev and Shauna and anyone else just jump in. The steps I went through are just the natural steps that you would go through and identifying your domains, identifying the instruments, and you may stop there. Okay, you may stop there. But if on the basis of going through that work, you say, boy, it would be nice to, and maybe we'll hear from the OA Flare to put these things together. So the weights, so that you're absolutely right. The new step here is the weights. Okay, that you've already gone through, identify your domains, identify the instruments. Okay, and now the question now is, if you want to put them together, how do you weight them together? And then once you weight them together, okay, once you come up, say with that DAS, you have to still put the DAS through the OMRAC filter. Okay, to look at its truth, discrimination, and feasibility.
Yeah, exactly.
I just wanted to place it within the larger context. Okay.
Yep.
But you, Loretta,
sorry.
is Shauna. So just to say, you could still develop a core outcome set without ever having to do anything with a composite ever.
Yeah.
So this isn't like, oh, I've got a core outcome set. Now I have to, develop a composite of some sort.
Yeah, the best thing there is to go back.
Just in case that was the question, I was like, yeah.
Oh,
yeah. No, it's fine.
Yeah, I took the question from the opposite end, that you don't have to go through all these steps to develop your core. You can build on it. So if you've gone through and you found your core domains, you found your instruments, and then someone said, well, here's a target. I know Francis and the OA Flare group may have said, well, we want to look at OA Flare. Okay, they may have already had some core domains identified. They may have already had some instruments identified for that. And now the question is, how can they put it together?
And the second one, it's contextual factors, because they might affect some of the components of those composite instruments. So I think it would be, we will need to add some guidance also on how to work with contextual factors with these composite instruments.
Yeah, I think the whole contextual factors fit here as well as in other areas. I agree. Yeah. Which is, of course, the other group.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. So maybe we can move on to our working group's experience. And Francis, you're going to talk a little bit about exactly what George said about how you all started to come up with those components and the qualitative work that you did around that.
Yep. Thank you, George, for the so nice introduction, which helped me positioning the work we did as a mod. We did a mod, which is mostly used, as you said, in rheumatology. Initially, the work was that we felt it would be interesting to have an instrument for measuring specifically OA flare, and realized that it was, at the time, mostly measured by the pain. Only pain flare was encountered by clinicians or by instruments. So we first started with a literature review that found no instrument at all except for measuring pain accuracy and pain explosions, sometimes flare. So we felt it was not enough, and we started a project under the umbrella of this working group at OMRAT by using a dual language approach in both French and English with the Australian team and the French team, generating from a patient interview and health professionals interview a number of statements that would be able to characterize a flare. We ended up with 180 statements from this approximately 45 interviews, something like that, plus focus groups as well. So it was hard to have only one instrument with that. We proceeded with certain steps of reduction and ended up first with 50 items. And in the meantime, we started to try to find a definition of what a flare is exactly. And these all resulted in a work that was presented at OMRAC 2018, where we had the flare OA defined as a transient state, different from the usual state of the condition, with a duration of a few days, characterized by onset, worsening of pain, swelling, stiffness, impact on sleep, activity functioning, and psychological aspects that can resolve spontaneously or lead to a need to adjust therapy. So we had a frame, we had a definition, we had a list of items, and we asked for what are the domains in which these items could be grouped into. And the next OMRAC in 2020, the virtual one, helped us to first endorse the definition was endorsed in 2018, and the domains were discussed at the virtual one. It turned out that in the onion, the flare OA was not considered a core outcome domain in osteoarthritis, but was put on the research agenda. So we had to work it out. And on this approach, we elicited 5 domains that were, as listed, the pain, swelling, stiffness, psychological aspects, and impact of symptoms. And for all of them, we had a clear definition written and a number of items grouped into it. Then it helped reducing the number to 33 items, and we started to measure the state of people in a sample of 390, how much? Almost 398 patients across Australia, France, and US for getting information about the quality of measurement of these items using discrete choice measures, like this rating scale. Then we used the RASH model to look at it, and we could remove a number of items that were either redundant or completely disordered, looking at the answers. And we ended up in 2 steps to 19, finally to 16 items. So the final instrument was the results of this approach. But also, in the meantime, we said, well, a composite should be composed normally of different instruments. We have approved of domains. Are there any instruments that really measure these different domains simultaneously? So we run a second literature review that was in 2022, and we identified 15 instruments, among which we again ran a Delphi survey with the member of the working group, like we did for the items. And this ended up with showing that among these 15 instruments, none was really covering all the 5 domains except the flare, the flare OA 16. Of course, it's a little bit circular because we were anticipating this information from the domains we were measuring. But it would have saved a lot of work if we would have already had other instruments if they were validated. So we had to continue the validation of the instrument, and which has resulted in the final, the work where we are now, the work in progress, is well advanced because we have the validity of the instruments, and we have also progressed toward a composite, including the 5 domains, and using different statistical approach to derive a composite. So I think I stop there so that you can have a picture of the different steps for creating this mod instrument, as you said, George, and open to question. And I put you in the chat. I put you the reference of a video that shows you all the steps that we have been taken in during this process.
Awesome. Thank you. And you now have that into trials, right? You've got it into 6 trials.
Yeah, if you're talking about what's in progress, we have incorporated the questionnaire into 6 different trials,
Around the
one cohort study and 5 clinical trials. 4 of them are ongoing now, and we are waiting for the data to test for responsiveness of the single instrument itself by domain and by the composite measure as well.
If I can, the one thing that I really liked about the OA flare group is that they had a target concept, OA flare, and they took their time to come up with a very well-defined a definition for it, which is, I believe, that the previous OMRAC that Francis just described. So going back to why you may need a composite is to come up with that target concept, see what's involved in it, and then see what's around in terms of known domains or instruments of them. And if I remember right, you had the domains in your mind, Francis, but you could not find an instrument that measured them all. Is that correct? So that's why you built.
Yeah. Among the 15 instruments, we spotted 55 instruments, but by the end of the reduction, 15 were submitted to the Delphi survey. Only this one was really complete.
Yeah.
And also keep in my mind that the original target was to say, we don't want a multi-component measure. We want a unique score because we want it useful for clinicians and for clinical trials, in which, so the work will be, we will end up with a continuous score, and then there was a further step to define a threshold for deciding there is a flare or there is no flare, because it measures occurrence and severity of a flare. So still some work to do.
Okay. And then going back to Loretta's question, original question, is that you define your concept, then you see what domains are out there, what instruments out there, and then how you can combine it. And I think Shauna brought up that just because you may define domains of interest and instruments that measure those domains, you don't have to go and put them together and weight them together. You start with the target concept and you go forward, which is what they did in OA flare.
Exactly.
Sorry, Beth. Yep.
No, it's great. Thank you. Any other questions for Francis? Yeah, thanks for clarifying that, Shauna and George. Great.
Yep.
Katie, I think at the end when Katie tells us their experience as well, others might have additional questions. So Katie, over to you.
Oh yeah. Well, thanks. So the PSA group we are sort of in a different situation. As you know, the core domain set development has been since the early 2000, and then we have an update in 2016. And then during this period of time, there is a lot of PSA composite has been around there. So then we end up the core domain set has been updating. And then it's like 2016 from now, it's like 8 years. We might be updating them anytime soon. We don't know. So, but then the core set is not a set in stone thing. There might be chances that will be updated. And then there are like 10 composites in the market that has been used in clinical trials. So it's like hard to say that, let's develop a new one and forget the old one, because we did not develop these composites according to the recent core domain set that we have. So we decided we evaluate the measurement property and look into domain match. And the concept of composite in PSA has been very complicated, has been discussed in meetings, and people have been voting and talking about this one better than that one. Why I say it's not inclusive of the skin domain, while other people say the skin is not informative. The fatigue has never been in any of the composite. And then we draw up the table we draw up the table of matching the domain set, and then all the composite, and none of the composite currently is covering everything. So that's make the discussion very tense, and we are nowhere. And then we ended up trying to define each one of these in what situation that it would be useful. Is it in trials? Is it a responder criteria? Or is it longitudinal study? Or is it clinical practice? So in each of these candidate composite that has been existing in the market, we try to as clearly define what is the intended use and population. Then we have a vote, and then we come down to several, to 6 or 7, and then we also evaluate them with the Omeric way, the filter, and look at the measurement property. And then the working group also have a voting to see how much matching, how much that they can live with the current composite, and matching with the concept of defined purpose of use for that population. So with that, we come down to like 3. So I think that is what we are trying to look at now. We have a working group vote for domain match and feasibility, and then we are going on to the patient research partners to see whether how much they can live with the existing composite. And then we look at all these and see whether it is good enough or it is not good enough. If it is not good enough, none of them is working, then we end up needing to develop a new one. So luckily, it seemingly there are 3 runners. So we are going to have the GRAPPA meeting next month, and then we will be getting the data to see whether stakeholders will think that it is good enough or not.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, fingers crossed.
Well, I certainly remember when we I guess it was Martin DeWitt presented the PSA from the patient perspective, and we produced, and I'm sure that Shauna remembers that well because she had to redo the table about 16 times. But we had the 7 different, I think it was 7 different composites in PSA, and then you had all the potential items down here. And was it just MSK, or was it all inflammation involved, and so on? And each of the composites involved different components, and so you got a long road there, Katie. So OA Flair's trying to get one. You got about 7. You have to decide which one or create a new one. The one thing that came out of our discussions when we were looking at that in more detail was that the composite doesn't necessarily have to include everything that's on your list. And again, it goes back to, I think, to the target. What's that target concept? What you're really after, and then decide on the components, and then the weighting after that. But I know that the group has put a lot of work into this over the years, and they have quite a few.
I think just to echo exactly what George said, a lot of times, or what we're seeing right now, and I think the direction that this workshop is going to be going at the next meetings, spending a lot of time on why do you want a composite? What are you trying to accomplish that can't be done with a domain and an instrument? Why are you bringing these things together? And really spending a lot of time and a lot of discussion on what you're pointing to. And we had lots of conversations with Peter at the beginning when we were figuring out composites, about just pull everything together and then that's your composite. You just pull all of your domains from your core domain set, you put them all together, and that's a composite, and that is not a composite. So what you can have is maybe a composite for a few things, pointing at something like flare, and then you have additional composites like paint intensity with a specific instrument for that domain potentially. So you could see a core outcome set look something like a composite for a few things, and then a domain and an instrument for a few other things.
Thanks, John.
Yeah.
We target at the primary responder criteria because today the PSA are still using ACR 20, 50, 70, which the community is really unhappy about. So we try to find a solution to that.
Mhm.
And then we have been trying ourselves best not to touch the quality of life because we have already endorsed PSAID as the quality of life. So we are not touching into PSAID.
Okay.
Francis has his hand up.
Well, and it's so tricky. Everybody has their own preference about what instrument they want. It's going to be an interesting discussion meeting. So, sorry, go ahead, Francis.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Katie, for the presentation. I think in this disease, you may have indeed a lot of different items that may or may not overlap each other. And I understand your deal is to be mostly comprehensive, but not too long. So that's a paradox. And did you have a way, in some way, because there is some, sometimes when you want a weight composite, you may give a much weight to some item and very few weight to other ones. Going further to that, you may even decide to not include some items into the list because you think they are no weight really in the phenomenon that you want to measure. But there is also another reason that did you look at the degree of correlation between the different items in case you could have one for measuring, like representing the others and not imposing the burden of measuring all of it?
Yeah, I definitely see your point, Francis. Thank you very much. There are two composites that has been created that way, the CP-DI and the PASTAs. They have been using the data to tell treatment changes, etc., and then giving a weight to each of these components to see which are the most informative. There are others who take some of the more important and put them equally. So they're in different development stage of these composites, that thing has been incorporated, but may not be convincing enough because people will criticize, because your population profile is different from the other population profile. Say, for example, the pastas has already kicked out the skin component, and people have always been trying to bring the skin back, and then saying that,
Yep.
the similar discussion.
I see very well what happens here.
Okay, I think Shauna brought up a very interesting point, and the one that we need to emphasize to all groups is that the composite is just not, you get your core domains and your instruments. It's just not a way of combining them, okay, and combining them all. And again, I know I mentioned this several times. I think you really have to start with your target concept and then go from that and not just say combine these. And I remember when we worked on the ACR remission criteria, there was a tendency to look at the ACR, the core set for the ACR 20, for example, and we had to get out of that mindset because we were looking at the target concept of remission and what was the best way of looking at remission and what was the best way of building an instrument to measure that. So I think that's important. We have to really get that point across, that it's just not the next step to combine all your core sets that you found in during your process. And I think both the way that the OA Flare group has done it, and starting with the target concept and going that way, and the concerns that Katie has and the way that they want to arrange some of the various domains or that they have to look at, and what do they really want to measure, I think are really two good examples. But anyway.
I think these are really two ways to go to put emphasis on the content. We want to have the content, make sure it is really containing what things happens, what people value. And they don't want to get rid of some items like skin, for instance, in the second one because they value it very much, despite the fact that it could be strongly correlated with another item that could be already measured. So expressed differently, I think the same concept, measuring the content is the major thing. That's why the definition at the origin is the most important.
Yes, I agree. And taking all perspectives, that definition, not just the provider perspective, but the patient perspective and other components. Yeah.
And that's such an important piece of OMRAC, right? We concentrate a lot on the domain itself and the work that goes into that and the whole content. We do a lot of work up front. So that's a very important piece for us. Wow, thank you guys. That was awesome. Any other additional questions before we? As Shauna said, we're going to be planning that wonderful workshop. So,
well, and I wonder if post GRAPPA we could have a chat with you, Katie, about how it went, and especially since we want to focus a lot of our work on how you decide to, go towards a composite if you want to go down that very complicated path, and hopefully you'll help us with that, maybe along with, I know Flair's continuing to help us with that, so that's good.
And the PSA group, they're a very hardworking group. They're very cerebral group. They follow nice processes and so forth. So I think we can learn a lot from their experience. Yeah, so solve it, Katie, so we can learn.
And Anna Marie had written to me saying she was going to join today, but I think something came up, so we were going to be excited to have her back. That's awesome. Yep. Any final comments? So remember that just an update that we don't have the town halls for the next 2 months. We'll have join again in September, but any final comments or thoughts before we close?
Will it be the same time in September?
September 17th at 8 a.m. Eastern. Unfortunately, sorry. Hope that works. And thank you to both you guys, Katie, George in particular for doing the overview, and Katie and Francis for joining us, and all your questions really help to feed in